When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms, and half of the third floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m. and said he had left his keycard in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary keycard and charged $2 to be returned when theirs is located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied student. At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties and I forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not to. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he had just forgotten his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to the room with him. He asked me for my name, and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the door manually with the master key, and told him that I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said, "No, it's okay, I'll close it," and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really fucking weird, but I tried not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for the room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student, since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and thought maybe it was just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I really started to feel like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into his room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed, etc. He said that there was a leak under the fridge. He held out a little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no. I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look if anything was broken. I had my back to him, and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said, "No, I need them to see." His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner, he said, "Ella, it's okay, you can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away, and trying to remain composed, I said, "No, thanks, I need to keep them on." Even though he was creeping me the fuck out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me, or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit, and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door and closed it again, and told me to keep it closed. I told him no, I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focused on getting the fuck out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into his bedroom, saying that the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in, quote, his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed, nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking he had just arrived today and he hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get me back in to get his shoes and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually, and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he was back inside and ran to the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room that he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get to the other side and wait, now that I knew he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it. Then he put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them that he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously he fucking didn't. That's why I called you guys, crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security then asked for his student card, and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by a big as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said, across the street. One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and uhs and saying he didn't know. They'd ask, "Were you here trying to see a friend? Do you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know. No reason. I was just here." At one point he tried to tell them that he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still fucking unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me they found the door deadbolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again. To this day, I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still give me the heebie-jeebies. Quick backstory. I work at a gas station on a main route. We see a lot of travelers passing through. Only one person works each shift, and it's a 24-hour store. We're short-staffed, so I agree to an overnight. I'm female. I work in a state that's always had self-serve gas stations. So this guy comes in. I ask him if he needed any help, and he says no. He's just getting some gas at the pump, but needs to use the bathroom. The guy uses the bathroom and then goes back outside. I go back to work on whatever invoices we got yesterday. About 5 to 7 minutes later, he comes back inside and tells me that he's confused about the pump. He directly says, "You might have to come outside to help me." Customers don't often say this. They usually just complain that it's not working, so I'm already feeling weird about this guy. I shake it off because he looks like a nerd, and I don't really feel afraid of him. I look at the register to see what error came up for his pump, and there's no errors. The register doesn't even say it was in use. Even if someone tries to pay and nothing's wrong with their payment, it'll at least say payment/loyalty timed out, but literally it had no sign of him trying to use it before asking me for help. I ask him if he just wants to pay inside. He agrees to, gets his wallet out of his car, and then pays $10. I give him his receipt and he says, "Can you help me? I don't understand the machine." And I say, "We aren't really allowed to leave the store during overnight shifts, as it's just me here, and it's not safe to go outside." I don't know why I told him I was alone, but he wasn't seemingly threatening. He proceeds to say, "I don't understand what it's asking me. I need help. I'm not scary." I tell him again that I can't go outside because it's store policy for the overnight shift and say, "It's not that you're scary, I just can't go outside." I would have to tell a little old lady asking for help at this hour the same thing. Which is true, we can't even take out the trash during overnights. He starts to walk away from the register counter now, but then stops again at the door and asks me one last time to come outside and help him. I'm pretty annoyed at this point. I've said no twice now. I'm not going, so stop asking. I finally say, in a super annoyed tone, "Okay, all you need to do is 1. Pick up the nozzle, 2. Select the fuel grade button, and 3. Put it in your tank and squeeze the handle. I'm not going outside." Then he finally goes back to the car, and the register tells me that he had no trouble pumping gas. Also, his plates seem like they're from the state I work in. This kind of thing wouldn't make me suspicious usually, but the fact that he originally opted for me to go outside instead of bringing money inside at 3 a.m. is weird. Along with how he didn't bother to use the pump before he came inside to ask for help, claiming it wasn't working, and him not taking my first no for an answer. No means no. I work in a prison. When I was new, I was working overtime one night in a housing unit that had seen a lot of death. It was well after midnight, and all the other offenders were supposedly to be in their cells. Since this was a medium security prison, the offenders still had access to leave their cell to use the communal bathroom at night. Well, I was going in for the 2 a.m. count. I watched an offender walk down the stairs from the second level and into the bathroom. I stood at the entrance to the bathroom and yelled in to ask them what cell they were in so I could add an extra body to that cell for my count, but I got no answer. I then walked into the bathroom and searched everywhere, but found absolutely nobody. I told one of my coworkers about what had happened, and the first thing they asked me was he tall and skinny with long dreads? When I answered yes, I was told, "That's Mr. Bones. He killed himself a few years ago, but he still hangs around." I still get goosebumps thinking about it. The hotel I worked at was small, only 53 rooms in the entire place. It's located next to downtown in a town in central Minnesota. As a night audit, you worked by yourself, with the shift being from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You don't get many people checking into the hotel at night, 1 to 3 at most. The first duty as the night audit was to lock the doors, so only guests could get in with their key. There's also a phone on the wall next to the main entrance, in case somebody arrives after the doors are locked, or somebody orders pizza, what have you. There's a front door in the lobby, a back door in the lobby, and 2 side doors. I proceeded to lock all the doors and head into the back room behind the front desk to do laundry. As there's no staff on hand to do laundry, another task for the night audit is to finish any remaining laundry that wasn't finished during the day. There's a cordless phone you can bring with you when you're going into the back or around the other parts of the hotel. We had no more scheduled check-ins that night, but there was a couple of rooms available. I heard somebody try and open the front door, was unsuccessful, and left. Moments later, though, the phone rang, and when I answered, the other person did not talk right away. I walked up to the front desk, and the other person finally started talking. They went on a spiel saying that they were a former cop, and something about, forgive me, this part is a bit fuzzy, and I say I blacked out due to fear, having court in the morning, and that if they weren't let in, they were going to come in and shoot me, and that they were circling the hotel. I told them I was sorry, we didn't have any rooms available, and they hung up before I even finished my sentence. There are windows that look out the front of the hotel that is visible from the computer I had walked to during the phone call. I looked out the window, and there was a person standing across the street staring back at me with a phone in their hand. At this point, I'm really freaking out, and I go to all the doors and double check that they're locked. It was a good thing I checked, because one of the side doors had been propped open with a doorstop. Obviously, I shut the door, and proceeded to go to a conference room with sight of where that person was standing. I kept the lights off and peeked through the blinds, but the person was gone. I was pretty freaked out the rest of the night, because there are windows pretty much everywhere in this hotel, so if this person was watching me, they would be able to all night if they pleased. I work in a fairly busy hospital downtown, in the NICU. I usually work at night, and I kid you not, this happened to me less than 5 minutes ago. I figured it would be good to get this down in writing before I forgot. It's also a way for me to have some sort of proof in case something comes of it. During orientation, we're taught to be observant to the signs of a possible abductor. We were taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behavior. Luckily, I've never encountered a strange individual until just now. It's currently 2:59 a.m., and I've been sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clerical work around the unit. I also watch the cameras to make sure no one is here that isn't supposed to be here. It's usually pretty quiet at night, however. I've already had a sort of weird night, so this just adds a cherry on top of it. The NICU and most of the second floor is a locked unit. This means that in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone which then rings to the desk. Usually it's parents wanting in to see their babies and family members who are lost. It quiets down a lot around 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I can see who's picking up the first phone. I had been sitting here browsing Reddit when the phone rang. I glanced over at the phone, thinking it was a parent wanting an update or something like that. It took me a second to register that it was the number for this first set of door/phone. I picked it up and looked over to the screen. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door, and she said that she wanted to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought up from the emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she unintelligibly rambled off a Latino name that I only caught the first part of. Knowing that we did not have any new admissions, I told her that we didn't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and she again said that her cousin had been brought up from the ED. I told her in that case she would want to go to labor and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated and then said okay and walked away. I got a really weird feeling from her, so I checked the census to see if there was anyone that was being assessed in L&D, and there wasn't. So either she was at the wrong hospital, or she wanted into the unit to do something a little bit more sinister than just, quote, see her cousin. I shrugged it off and figured her cousin was in L&D, that she would find her and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared in her extremely baggy clothing and her sling. The only difference was that this time, she was putting the sling on and was using her, quote, injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and that L&D said that they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing, and that she would need to get in contact with her cousin and to go back over to L&D. She got hostile for a second, and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know. But creepy lady who looked like a baby snatcher? Let's not ever meet again.